The process of change, what I've discovered, requires unlearning. That's the hard part about change, is unlearning, and then it's relearning. It's literally breaking habits that we have within ourselves, and then after we break those habits of thought, of behavior, and emotion, is to reinvent a new self. It's pruning synaptic connections and sprouting new connections. It's unfiring and unwiring and refiring and rewiring. It's losing your mind, really, and creating a new one. It's deprogramming and reprogramming. It's unmemorizing emotions that are stored in the body and then reconditioning the body to a new mind and to a new emotion. And so everybody has a story about the past or their past. And we tell those stories based on the emotions we experience from the past. And the stronger the emotion that we feel from some incident, some experience in our life, the more altered we are inside of us, the more we pay attention to what's causing it. And that moment becomes a moment frozen in time. And the brain takes a series of snapshots, and that's called a memory. So then we think neurologically within the circuits of our own personal subjective experience of that reality based on the feeling that we get from the experience. I think the problem is that most people don't know that when they think about the event, they're producing the same changes chemically in their brain and body as if the event was occurring. So you review the event 50 to 100 times in one day, and it takes the thought and the feeling, the images and the emotions, the stimulus and response that starts the conditioning process of the body actually living in the past. Now the challenge is the firing and wiring of that memory may not be the truth, but it's the truth for you. And the emotions then become the boundary of what feels familiar and what feels known. And so the person can actually live a healthy life and go on with their life a whole way in spite of the trauma. The challenge is by living by that same emotion, it becomes so familiar to us that guilt or shame or unworthiness or fear just becomes how we normally feel. And so those feelings tend to drive our thoughts, right? And if you can't think greater than how you feel, and feelings and emotions are the record of the past, then for the most part, you're thinking in the past. And if how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, well, your entire state of being is in the past. Now, the challenge is that the body is so objective. It doesn't know the difference between the event that created the trauma 15, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago and the chemistry, the emotion that you're creating by thought alone. The body's believing it's living in the same past experience. So then the person is actually viewing or perceiving reality through the lens of the past. And so anything that triggers anything that they can associate that's relatively familiar, then the big thing is get ready because you don't want that to happen again in your future. So the brain is always forecasting the worst case scenario based on the memory of the past. And now the brain is actually coming up with that worst case scenario because if you prepare for the worst, there's better chances of surviving whatever that trauma is going to be again. So the challenge is then is that we start out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field. We're selecting really one of the worst outcomes we could possibly imagine, embellishing that outcome, and then emotionally embracing that future before it happens in the anticipation of the event. And now we're taking that thought and the feeling, the image and the emotion, the stimulus and response, and we're conditioning the body and the brain into looking like that future event has already occurred. And the stronger the emotion we feel from whatever we're imagining, the more we pay attention to what we're imagining. And we're embossing that circuitry further in the brain, and we're emotionally conditioning the body more into that emotional state. So if the familiar past in the conditioning process is the known, and the predictable or anticipated future is the known, there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the sweet spot of that present moment. Now, the person can live a normal life feeling those emotions and being successful and having relationships and all that stuff until it comes time where they get a diagnosis. Or it comes time where they go bankrupt, or there comes time where they are ending a relationship, or something goes wrong where they want to create a new career or a new life. And now, all of a sudden, they come right up against their past. Why? Because that's what's been defining them all along. And all I'm asking them to do is stop telling the story of your past and start telling the story of your future. Stop believing in your past, real or imagined, and start believing in your future. Stop romancing the past and let's start romancing a future. So the unlearning process then, 95% of who we are is a set of memorized behaviors, automatic emotional responses, unconscious habits, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that are automatic like a computer program. So if we're in a program, then we're unconscious. So in order for us to change, we have to become conscious of our unconscious thoughts and the story and the narrative that we tell and those memories, to become familiar with how we speak or how we act and become so conscious that we don't go unconscious to that behavior. And then we have to look at the emotions that we live by every single day and realize, are these emotions loving to me? And then all of a sudden name it. Wow, this is actually guilt. I just didn't know it was guilt. It's just, or unworthiness. It's just how I normally feel. And I use everything and everyone in my life to make this feeling go away. But if I'm relying on my outer world to change my inner world, when things are good, I'll feel good. But when things are bad, I'll feel bad. So changing your emotional responses to the challenges and circumstances in your life and no longer living by that emotion is no different than the withdrawals we get from a drug, because no new information can enter the nervous system that's not equal to the emotion the person is processing. So then you can tell the person the answer to the problems in their life, but unless they overcome that emotion, they'll be perceiving reality through that lens, a lens of the past. So then the fundamental point here is that the trauma then that the person is experiencing from the past, they're reliving that every single day. So then when it comes time to be defined by a vision of the future, if you're living in the past, it's so much easier to forget that vision than to remember it. So how do we remember the vision of the future? Well, we got to feel the feeling of the emotion before it occurs, before the event occurs. And if you're feeling the emotion before the event occurs, if you really practice trading resentment or impatience or sadness for an elevated emotion, you teach people the science behind that. If they're feeling the emotions of their future, they'll believe in their future more than they believe in their past. Teach them how to hold the intention of what that future is. And you take that thought and the feeling, the image and the emotion, the stimulus and response, and you can actually condition the brain and body into a different state of being. What's the importance of that? Somehow, the disease is there, and now the disease is gone. Somehow, the person's life wasn't changing because they weren't changing. The moment they start changing the way they think and the way they act and the way they feel, all of a sudden their life starts to change. So what's the importance of that? Well, if you're doing the work and you're seeing your life changing, you're going to want to do more of it. So you become a work in progress. So then you're always looking for the blind spots. It's no longer about your healing. You're not asking the question, why am I not healing? The real question is, what do I have to change about myself in order to heal? Right. Now it becomes very practical for the person. So the unlearning process is one of the hard parts because you've got to light a match in a dark place. And if you're conscious, that means you're no longer unconscious. And if you're conscious and you're no longer unconscious, you're no longer in the program. So we begin to objectify or object ourselves. So how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change. How many times do we have to go unconscious till we stop going unconscious and start staying conscious? That's the moment of change. And God, we get numerous opportunities in life. Every day is one lifetime. And if you just decided before you started your day who you no longer wanted to be, in thought, behavior, and emotion. Just remember that. Stay conscious of it. And who you do want to be. And think about the thoughts you do want to think. Rehearse how you're going to behave in your life with your family, with your kids, at work, on the Zoom call. And think about what emotions do I want to live by as if my future has already happened. So the cool thing about that is if you're feeling the emotions of your future before it happens, you're no longer looking for it. You're only looking for it when you're feeling the other emotions. When you feel those emotions before it happens, somehow those wonderful synchronicities and coincidences and opportunities begin to show up in our lives. And that proves to us we're the creators of our lives. I mean, people have affirmations all day long. Most of them are unconscious. I can't learn very well. I'm not a good meditator. I'm unhappy. That's their affirmation. Or every single day they wake up in the morning and they think about their problems. And their problems are memories from the past that are etched in their brain. The brain's a record of the past. The moment they start thinking about their problems, since their memories of the past are thinking the past, every one of those emotions has an association with it, emotionally from the experience. So the moment they feel unhappy, now their body's in the past. Keep doing that over and over again, and the body literally will be unhappy. And you could say, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, all you want with your conscious mind. I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy. I'm abundant, I'm abundant, I'm abundant. And your body's saying, no, you're not. You're miserable. And that thought never makes it past the brainstem to the body. So then, visualization then, if the person is visualizing the future that they want, but they're living in fear, the fear is actually not supporting the vision of the future. They don't believe in that future. So it takes more than that. So then what we discovered was that there's a formula, a way to teach people based on over 18,000 brain scans we've studied, over thousands and thousands and thousands of measurements on the heart, on gene expression, on protein regulation, on neurotransmitters, on immune regulation, on thousands and thousands and thousands of different cellular metabolites, looking to see what is it that truly causes a person to change. And it takes a reboot. And in fact, when you stop thinking, when you stop analyzing, when you're no longer paying attention to your body, you're no longer aware of your emotions or your habits or your drives, when you're not thinking about the people in your life or your cell phone or your social media or your car or where you need to go or where you're sitting or where you sleep or where you work, and you're not preoccupied with time. There's a wonderful thing that happens in the brain when we become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time. That's the moment where we shut the mechanism down of thinking, and by focusing on nothing, on space, there's a recalibration of the nervous system back to more order, back to more wholeness, back to more oneness. And if you're going to marry a clear intention with an elevated emotion to create reality, you better have a coherent brain, because that's the mechanism that sends the signal out. That's the directive. That's the intention. That's the possibility. It's the creative center. And if you're going to combine it with an elevated emotion, if you're going to believe in that future that you're imagining with all your heart, it better be open. You better learn how to activate it, and you got to feel into that heart of yours. And when you do, you begin to change your electromagnetic field. In fact, you have a Wi-Fi signal, and if the thought sends a signal out and the feeling draws the event back to us, if the thought is the electrical charge in the quantum field and the feeling is the magnetic charge, and the heart has a magnetic field, and this is beyond polarity, this is wholeness, this is oneness, this is the union of opposites. That means that we have to feel the feeling before the experience, and not wait for the healing to happen to feel gratitude, or the new relationship to feel love, or the wealth to feel abundance or worthiness, or the mystical moment to feel awe. That would be cause and effect. We want to cause an effect. So then causing an effect in your life then means then you have to lay down the very thing you used your whole life to get what you want for something greater to occur. And that's a big step for a lot of people. What's the significance of that, okay? We can all get successful. You can learn certain skills, you can be trained, you can make the right choices, you can learn from your mistakes, you can take more courses, more seminars, you can go at it matter to matter, and this is the plane of doing.
Brute force.
Yeah, you can get there, you can force the outcome, you can control the outcome, you can compete for the outcome, you can manipulate the outcome, you can predict the outcome, you can plan for the outcome, you do all those things. There's rules in this three-dimensional world. And when the experience happens, then the experience produces the emotion. It takes away the lack of not having what you want. You get the new car, you get the new relationship, you get the better health. You wait for the experience to occur. The experience then, the end product is the emotion, and it fills the lack or separation. But we create that way. You see someone with something you like and you don't have it, your brain naturally starts thinking about you having it. We're creative by nature. But in the 3D world, you got to wait for the experience. You got to do something to make it happen. And of course, doing requires time and energy. So you can get really good at that, and you can collect resources and savings and all that stuff, and you can do it easier. My interest is another way. I want to shorten the distance between the thought of what we want and the experience of having it, between the cause and the effect, and that's called time, right? So if we're creating from matter, then there's a lot of things that we have to do to get what we want. And if we're living in stress and we're living in survival, Now we feel more like matter and less like energy. And now those hormones drive us in our animal nature to try to get what we want. But sometimes, people cheat, they steal, they lie, they do whatever they can to get what they want. That's the game. But then if you can create from the field instead of from matter, it's not matter that's emitting a field, it's the field that's actually creating matter. So if you could change the field and change the information in the field, is it possible then you can change the experience in three-dimensional reality? And the closer you get to singularity, to source, to oneness, to wholeness, to absolute, whatever you want to call that, and you're creating from the field instead of from matter, every thought in the quantum produces a frequency. So the thought of your wealth in the quantum should produce the frequency or the feeling of abundance. And if you can experience the feeling of that ahead of the actual event, you're beginning to change information in the field. Keep doing that. Thought objectifies and conditions reality. So you create a thought form, and in time, all of a sudden, you start having these synchronicities and these outcomes in your life. If you can't get beyond your body, and your attention is on your body, then you're matter trying to change matter. If you're thinking about your cell phone and your partner or your kids, none of these are bad, but if you can't get beyond them, they own you. If you're thinking about how much time it's going to take or how much time the meditation is going, you haven't dissociated from the very world of three-dimensional reality to create something differently with. So that process of overcoming ourselves, that process of overcoming is the process of becoming.